What if Earth once knew something and forgot, not in silence, not in violence, but in the slow turning of its magnetic skin? The poles those ghostly sentinels have wandered before. They've vanished, flipped, returned, as if trying to remember a shape lost to time. Wherever you are tonight, I'm glad you're here. Let the world fall away now. Let your breath soften. This is not a bedtime story. This is the story of the bed itself, the planet beneath you, and what it remembers. When we forget, the earth is not still, not in its breath, not in its blood, and not in its compass. What we call north is not fixed. It is not a throne in the sky. It is a drifting echo, a wandering ghost, a point that hums rather than holds. And it has moved, for centuries, for millennia, for aeons so slow that mountains did not notice. There was a time when the poles were reversed, south above, north below. And before that, they danced, they flickered, they paused. The field faded, then returned like a whisper half remembered. But what does it mean when the very thing that tells direction forgets where to point? Does the world become lost? Or does it begin to remember something deeper than direction? Beneath the surface, where sunlight cannot chase and sound dissolves into mineral dreams, the Earth's core turns. Slowly, ceaselessly, a great ocean of molten iron, circling, spiraling, singing in a frequency no ear can hold. It is here the compass begins, not in the sky, not in the stars, but in the dark, flowing furnace beneath our feet. The magnetic field is born in chaos, not harmony. It is the child of turbulence, of spinning metals, of asymmetries too vast for even time to smooth. And from that chaos comes a symmetry, temporary, fragile, a veil around the world. The field wraps the earth like a cradle of invisible breath, protecting, filtering, guiding. But the compass needle is not loyal. It is sensitive. It listens to that veil. And that veil is shifting. Now, tonight, the magnetic North Pole is no longer in Canada. It is fleeing toward Siberia, 40 miles a year, like a sleepwalker pulled by a dream it cannot name. Once, the North Pole was in the southern hemisphere, many times in fact. The Earth's field has flipped completely hundreds of times across history, not by choice, not by cycle, but by drift, and then collapse, and then reversal. There are no fossils of magnetism, but there are memories, in cooled lava flows, in clay sediment, in the orientation of iron-rich grains still pointing at ancient, vanished poles. Every time a volcano erupted and its lava cooled, it froze a magnetic whisper into stone, a compass trapped in rock, a direction sealed in silence. Scientists gather these whispers now across oceans, mountains, frozen continents, piecing together the language of a planet's lost compass. The field does not reverse in an instant. It may take thousands of years, or moments. The records are fragmented, and the Earth will not say. Instead, it murmurs through anomalies, regions where the field is weak, zones where compasses twitch, places where satellites falter and migratory birds turn circles in confusion. One such place is called the South Atlantic Anomaly, a wound in the sky's shield, a thinning, stretching distortion in the magnetic veil, and it is growing. Satellites that pass through it often glitch. Cosmic radiation, normally filtered, slips through like dust through a broken window. No one knows why it grows, but it does, quietly, consistently, as if something deep beneath is rearranging its thoughts. The Earth is not planning, but it is moving. Its compass is not broken, but it is remembering. And so, each year, the models must be updated. The World Magnetic Model, the silent map used by phones, ships, and planes, must be adjusted to match the wandering pole. Even in the age of GPS, even in the realm of satellites and code, the magnetic field still shapes the skies, still whispers beneath the waves, still dreams beneath the crust. What is a compass? If the pole is only passing through, the answer may lie not in where the field is going, but in where it has already been. In the chapters ahead, we will follow that memory, through ash, through iron, through sky, and silence. For now, listen to the turning. It has never stopped. But what the planet buried, It never truly forgot. There is no map for a shifting silence, only layers. And in those layers, the Earth records what it will never repeat. But always remember, the first reversal we know of is not the first reversal there was. It is simply the first that left behind a pattern quiet enough to survive. Called the Matuyama-Brunhes reversal, it occurred nearly 780,000 years ago. But time doesn't pass. It fossilizes. In Japan, black volcanic cliffs still hold the imprint of that moment. Lava cooled in the presence of a field gone silent, and then returned. But backward, what happened to the animals then? To the clouds? To the sky? Nothing, perhaps. Or everything. The trees did not write it down. The rivers did not keep records. And yet something changed. In the rock, in the sky's shimmer, in the bones of migrating birds who may have turned without knowing why. Today, those same birds still listen to something buried not in their memory, but in the blood. Tiny crystals of magnetite drift through their cells, not as thought, but as compass, biological, ancestral, magnetic, a built-in whisper of direction. Yet what happens when the Earth's whisper no longer agrees with its own breath? Some species rely on this ancient alignment to journey thousands of miles. Salmon through dark rivers, turtles across the wide oceans, whales beneath the crushing silence of the sea, all following paths written not in landmarks, but in field lines, invisible, alive, and ancient. And if those lines collapse, if North forgets where it lives, no one knows how many species will lose their way, or if some already have. The data is too soft, too ancient, too drowned in the background hum of change. But there are stories. Whales found stranded in strange fjords, birds circling longer than they should, sea turtles missing the beaches of their birth. Not proof, but echoes. And the echoes deepen when the field weakens. During a reversal, the magnetic field may lose up to 90% of its strength. For thousands of years, exposed, bare, unguarded, the Earth's surface becomes vulnerable, not just to light, but to what the light carries. Cosmic rays, solar particles, radiation from a sky no longer filtered. And the auroras would spread, no longer chained to the poles, but unfurling like curtains across the equator. Beauty without boundary, light without shelter, a glowing betrayal, like a memory turned inside out. And while the colours would soothe the eyes, the radiation beneath them would write in stranger ink, not in the sky, but in cells, in strands of DNA gently split and rearranged. Mutation is not always damage, it is also creation. But creation is not always gentle. There is a theory, still whispered, still debated, that magnetic reversals may brush against extinction, not as a cause, but as a curtain drawn over too many chances at once. Some believe the Lachamp event, a brief reversal 42,000 years ago, may have helped rewrite life's path, not through flame, but through forgetting. As the field collapsed, radiation levels surged, climate shifted, lightning storms grew wild, and caves, once temporary shelters, became permanent homes. It was during this time that ochre handprints appeared on cave walls, charcoal drawings, symbols, stories, perhaps the first true art, born not from inspiration, but from the long shadow of a sky that forgot to protect. That moment has a name now, the Adams Event, a title not of mythology, but of magnetism, named for the first human who forgot the stars and began to draw them. But the poles returned, as they always do. The field remembered its shape, and life fragmented, rearranged, continued to dream in flesh, because memory doesn't vanish. Its sediments, each grain of volcanic ash, each crystal of magnetite, each fossilized compass in basalt, they all tell the same story. The Earth is not broken, it is recursive, like a breath that spirals inward, before turning outward again. And in that spiral, somewhere between direction and forgetting, the compass dreams, not forward, but backward, to a time when it did not point north, but listened to a deeper pull, one not marked on any map. There are places on Earth where time bleeds through the ground, not in fossils or in stone, but in the magnetic orientation of dust. tiny particles, aligning themselves as they settle, turning ever so slightly as they fall, to follow the sky's invisible tide. A field so faint it cannot be felt by skin, yet strong enough to leave an imprint in clay. Not a scar, not a wound, but a signature, like breath left behind on a mirror. In these layers of silt, scientists have found proof of change. Not stories, not myths, but reversals, encoded in the grains that once danced on wind, captured now in earth hardened by time's slow hand. In China's Loess Plateau, the sediment runs deep, hundreds of meters of fine dust layered over millions of years, each layer a whisper, each colour a chapter, and within them, moments when the compass reversed. These are not events marked in fire, they are marked in silence, in shifts of orientation too slow for even the wind to notice, but always there, like the turning of a tide no one sees until the boats drift backward. And yet, even with so many layers, so many records tucked into stone and soil, no pattern has emerged. The reversals come without rhythm, without schedule, sometimes separated by 100,000 years, sometimes 30 million. They are not seasonal. They are not tied to orbits, or alignments, or catastrophe. They come like dreams, sudden, unprovoked, full of meaning only in retrospect. A compass does not warn, it only points, until it doesn't, and so the Earth's magnetic memory remains, less like a calendar, and more like a tide beneath time. Some have tried to model it, simulate the field's behavior on supercomputers, recreate the dynamo deep beneath the crust, where molten iron flows like thought through a sleeping mind. But the models grow chaotic. They resist prediction, as if the field itself remembers too much to be simplified, as if it is not just movement, but memory, grief, instinct. The liquid outer core, churning around the solid center, creates this vast, enveloping field. But why does it flip? No one can say. Perhaps the flow becomes unstable. Perhaps a convective loop collapses, and another rises to take its place, spinning the opposite direction. Or perhaps it is not an opposite at all, but a return to a previous self. The Earth, after all, does not think in lines. It turns, always turning, and in that turning, sometimes it forgets which way was forward. When that happens, when the field begins to unravel, strange things appear, magnetic excursions, false starts, moments when the field weakens and begins to reverse, only to change its mind. The Laschamp event may have been one, a brief inversion lasting just 1,000 years, a flicker, a rehearsal, a half-remembered breath, and then, suddenly, the poles returned, as if waking from a dream, confused, but familiar. These excursions, these partial reversals, are common, far more common than full flips, and perhaps they mean the Earth is always near reversal, always teetering at the edge of forgetting. But this edge is not a threat, it is part of the design, because to remember, something must first forget. The compass needle turns not just because the field tells it to, but because the field itself is listening, to the molten story beneath, to the silent orchestra of heat and flow, to the deep language of convection. That language has no nouns, no verbs, only movement, and rhythm, though it may falter, always returns. Not the same melody, but the same silence beneath it. There is no normal for Earth's magnetism, only now, only the current swirl, the present direction, the illusion of stability. Even the word pole implies stasis, but there is no stasis in the Earth's heart, only drift, only dance, only the quiet reminder that direction is a temporary choice, made by a planet still dreaming, still shifting, still remembering. Somewhere beneath Antarctica, the magnetic field is thinning, and across the oceans in South America, a mirror image grows. Two regions of weakness, twin shadows, one drifting east, the other west. They are not errors, they are patterns, or rather, fractures in a pattern too vast to name. The Earth's magnetic field is not a clean, symmetrical halo. It is warped, lopsided, breathing. It has always been this way. Not a flaw in the planet, but a memory of its molten birth. And so the poles drift, not in straight lines, but in swirls, loops, meanders. Each year, the magnetic North Pole moves farther and faster, from the Canadian Arctic toward Siberia. What was once a crawl is now a sprint, more than 40 miles a year, as if drawn by something not yet risen, or perhaps pulled by something already lost. Satellites adjust, navigation systems recalibrate. The world magnetic model, once updated every 5 years, must now be updated sooner. The Earth is forgetting, faster, and still there is no panic, because the change is slow, geologic, like watching a glacier melt through a mirror of dreams. But not all change is quiet. Sometimes the field disappears, not entirely, but enough. During reversals, the protective magnetosphere that shields the Earth shrinks, opens, lets in more of the solar wind. The sun's breath made wild. The atmosphere is stirred. Radiation reaches higher altitudes. Airlines must change flight paths. Satellites degrade more quickly. Power grids hum with unfamiliar tension. But even then, life goes on. For billions of years, the Earth has reversed. And still, forests have grown. Oceans have breathed. Eyes have opened. Because the Earth does not break when it forgets. It pauses. It listens. And then it begins again. Not where it left off, but somewhere near the same song. A new direction. A new whisper. The compass follows. And we, small creatures, with our own inner magnets, our own migrations, our own dreams of north, we follow too. Even if we don't know we're listening, we are to the field, to the memory beneath it, to the unsteady lullaby of direction, and perhaps, in some distant age, when the poles have long since drifted through reversal and back again, when maps have been rewritten, when birds have learned new songs, and satellites have fallen like stars, someone will dig through the ash and the silt and find a compass, fossilized in metal, still pointing toward a north that no longer exists. And they will ask, what dream was this? What direction did the Earth once know? And the rocks will answer, not with words, but with alignment, a frozen orientation, a whisper trapped in stone. And the story will begin again, because the compass doesn't forget. It rewrites, softly, slowly, inward, then out, like breath, like time, like the Earth itself. Some truths are not lost. They are simply folded beneath silence. Above the poles, the sky burns softly, not with fire, but with breath, not with smoke, but with solar wind, a light that dances green, violet, red, woven across the horizon like memory unspooling. It is called the aurora, but it is more than light. It is the language of the sun, whispered through the silence of space, caught in the Earth's magnetic veil. Without that veil, the sky would not shimmer. It would scorch. The auroras are guardians, signals that the shield still holds, that the charged particles racing from the sun have been curved, caught, diffused. But once, they didn't. There are periods in Earth's memory when the sky forgot where to fall, when the field collapsed, or reversed, or fractured, and the auroras broke their bonds. They did not stay near the poles. They drifted. They poured over equatorial skies, light in places where only darkness belonged. Imagine an aurora above the Amazon, emerald waves shimmering above African deserts, colours like breath over the coral sea, a planet lit not at its edges, but in its core, and beneath that, light ashes, because the beauty comes with a cost. When the field weakens, more than colour arrives. Radiation seeps down, softly, relentlessly. It is not a blaze. It is an erosion of ozone, of balance, of silence. The Lachamp event some 42,000 years ago was such a moment. The poles weakened, wavered, reversed. For nearly 1,000 years, the field was fractured, not gone, but thinned, porous, like lace unravelling in solar wind. And something shifted in the world, not all at once, not in explosion, but in pattern, in weather, in extinction. Tree rings from that era grow tight, constricted, stressed. Caves show records of storm surges, floods, cooling, dust in the ice cores, carbon changes in the air. It was as if the planet took a breath in and held it. The extinction of megafauna begins to echo here, in the same breath, not as cause, but as background, as curtain. In Australia, the great marsupial giants vanished. In Europe, the Neanderthals drew their last silhouettes. Coincidence? Perhaps. But silence has patterns too, and this silence is scorched with light. The auroras may have been visible every night, not at the poles, but everywhere. Children, if there were any, would have fallen asleep beneath skies that shimmered unnaturally, a perpetual twilight of colour, telling stories no one had words to understand. And in caves, hands reached out. Ochre palms, charcoal animals, the first deliberate marks, the beginning of myth. Was it art? Was it fear? Was it memory burning itself into stone? Perhaps the sky was too bright. Perhaps the light was too loud. And so the people went inward, into caves, into story. Shelter not just from cold, but from a sky that had changed its nature. Radiation levels rose. Mutations crept through DNA. Not all harmful, but all different. Change came softly in the smallest things. Cells, seeds, dreams. The earth doesn't erupt with its transformations. It exhales them. Through generations, through forgetting, and in the forgetting, something new is made. The aurora returns to its rightful place when the field settles. North is north again. The light is again a guardian, not a ghost. And life forgets the moment when the sky touched too close. But the layers remember. Ash in peat bogs, isotopes in ice, dust sealed beneath volcanic glass. Evidence not of destruction, but of a thinning, a moment when the field became porous, when the stars reached in with too much light, and beneath it all, the bones of those who could not adapt, of species whose magnetoreception failed them, of migrations that never found their return path. The aurora is beautiful, but beauty is not gentle. It is simply what remains, after silence has burned through. The earth never warned, it never had to, because what it forgets, it always folds into stone, and the stone never sleeps. The earth has no memory like ours, no recollection of faces, no lineage of names. Its memory is deeper, folded into patterns, melted into minerals, etched into the sky by things we cannot hold. And yet, there are echoes, buried deep in polar ice. Scientists have found them, isotopes of beryllium and carbon rare, ancient fingerprints of cosmic rays that once pierced the veil. These isotopes bloom in the ice like scars, silent, silvery proof that something once opened, and the sun reached through. It does not take a cataclysm, not an asteroid, nor a supervolcano, just a change, a lessening, a pause in the Earth's invisible breath, and then light where there should be none. Radiation, like dust drifting through a window left open too long. Mutation quietly sowed in the womb of the world. There is a sorrow in that, not from destruction, but from transformation, because the light that enters does not ask permission. It writes new rules, even as it illuminates the old, and sometimes it brings forgetting. The Neanderthals disappeared in this light, not in fire, not in war, but in a kind of erasure, a soft vanishing, a fading out of their patterns, until nothing remained but tools buried in silt, bones with no storyteller, silence where songs might have been, and in their place, something new. Our ancestors, those who walked deeper into the caves, those who painted, those who remembered in ochre, even when they could not remember in words. It was not a conquest. It was a migration through thresholds, from one kind of seeing to another. Could the auroras have shaped that? Could skies that burned for centuries rewrite how minds form? Could children born beneath shimmering radiation have dreamed in different directions? No one can say, but the timing echoes. The Earth's magnetic field is not just a shield. It is a filter, a memory keeper, a quiet gate between the inside and the infinite. And when that gate weakens, the infinite enters. The Lachamp event was brief, but it left fingerprints everywhere. In New Zealand's swampy trees, Growth rings narrow into near hibernation. In Arctic ice, beryllium-10 swells a quiet, shimmering ghost of too much sunlight. Even in tropical sediments, the signs appear, because when the sky opens, it does not choose where to fall. And yet, life continued. It adapted. It scattered. It took new shapes. The great megafauna giant wombats, cave lions, thunderbirds began to vanish. But other forms rose. Smaller, quicker, carriers of stories and seeds. The auroras remained, but they climbed northward, returned to the edges. Once again the breath of a sky held back, and we forgot. Or we thought we did. But memory is patient. It waits in lava, in pollen, in bones. It waits in the quiet evolution of creatures still drawn by invisible lines. Sea turtles still return to the beaches of their birth. Not by sight, but by something older, a magnetic map within the blood. And as the poles shift again, as magnetic north races across the Arctic, as anomalies widen and deepen, as the sky begins to flicker in new places, questions begin to rise. Will the field weaken again? Will it flip? Will the auroras return to the equator, burning their slow song across forgotten jungles? And if they do, what else will follow? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. Because the aurora is not just a show of light. It is a symptom, a sign of a field alive, of a planet in flux, of memory re-emerging. The ash beneath the aurora tells us not of endings, but of transformation. The sky changed, and so did the world, and maybe so did the mind. The auroras will come again, that much is certain. Not as omens, not as prophecy, but as consequence, because the poles are already moving. The field is already weakening, not catastrophically, not yet, but steadily. And with each fraction lost, the veil thins. There is no switch to flip, no alarm to sound, only drift, only the quiet pull of iron tides beneath the mantle, writing their reversal in spirals. And when the poles do flip again, whether in 10,000 years or 200, the auroras will pour once more across the equator, and the night will shine with a beauty we've forgotten how to fear. Will anyone remember what that means? Or will the light be mistaken for wonder? Instead of warning? For a time, it will seem like nothing has changed. Phones will still chirp, planes will still rise, cities will glow brighter than the sky, but satellites will struggle, communications will falter, radiation will rise, not as a wave, but as a background hum too steady to notice, until it has already written itself into circuits, into seeds, into skin. Yet the field will return. It always does. Not in the same shape, but in a rhythm as old as the core. Life will adjust. Species will shift. Some will vanish quietly, and others will awaken to new senses, new instincts, new directions whispered through a respun magnetic breath. The earth will not mourn. It does not grieve. It sediments. It builds stories in layers, like pages of a book no one knows they're writing. And those ashes beneath the aurora, the volcanic soot, the pollen choked in permafrost, the tree rings curled inwards, they will remain, not as ruins, but as records, because extinction is not the end. It is a rearrangement, a silence that retunes the chorus. The aurora knows this. It has burned across dying skies before. It has danced over the final migrations of ancient herds and glimmered above the last breaths of Ice Age fires. Not cruelly, not carelessly, just as a consequence of motion. Motion is the only memory the planet trusts. Not words, not walls, only flow, only erosion, only drift. And in that drift, the aurora returns, lighting the sky, not just with colour, but with time. It is a clock that does not tick. It blooms, and fades, and blooms again. And beneath it, in the warm caves of forgetting, we will draw again. We will press our palms into stone, leave stories in red dust, trace new maps across ceilings of soot, not because we understand, but because we feel. Because even when the field collapses, the pull remains, the need to orient, to belong, to point towards something larger, even if it has no name. That is the human aurora, our own shimmering within. A compass, not of direction, but of wonder. The ash will settle, the field will return, the light will retreat to the poles, and the earth will turn again in silence. But the story, the one written not in fire, but in forgetting, will remain, folded in basalt, cradled in isotope, told in the ashes beneath the aurora. The surface forgets, the ocean forgets, even the sky forgets, but the core remembers. Beneath miles of rock and pressure, beneath the slow crush of tectonic plates and fossil weight, there is a sea that does not sleep, a sea of molten iron, churning, spinning, folding heat into motion. It does not rise. It does not crash. It turns, and from that turn comes everything. The Earth's magnetic field is not made in the air. It is not whispered by clouds or sun or sky. It is born below, far below, where iron reigns in darkness. This rain is not gentle. It is not soft. It is weight, sinking through liquid metal from the solid inner core to the roiling ocean that surrounds it. A descent measured not in moments, but in epochs. As iron crystallizes in the heart of the earth, heavier elements sink, lighter ones rise, and this constant separation, this quiet convection of fire, spins the dynamo. It is not electricity in wires, it is flow in metal, charge carried not in sparks, but in spirals. And the spirals, remember, the field that wraps the earth like an unseen shroud, the field that guides birds and shields flesh, is shaped by this motion. Not just motion, but chaos, turbulence, because the outer core is not a smooth sphere. It is an orchestra of disruption, vortices, shear zones, flows twisting upon themselves like language with too many meanings. And in that twisting, structure, a field, a compass, a memory, but not a permanent one. The Earth's magnetic field is not stable. It is not symmetrical. It is not loyal. It wanders. It weakens. It reverses, because the core is not a machine. It is a storm, and the storm remembers old paths. Sometimes it returns to them. Sometimes it writes new ones. The iron rain falls in patterns we cannot predict, not because they are random, but because they are too vast, too deep, too slow. Imagine a word spoken once every 1,000 years. Imagine trying to learn the language from only a handful of syllables. That is the study of Earth's field. What scientists see, what they measure with satellites and probes, is the final layer, the surface hum. But beneath it is a syntax of convection, a grammar of molten descent. Each reversal, each excursion, each shift in pole or strength or silence is not an accident. It is a phrase, part of a sentence the Earth has been speaking since its heart began to cool. This language of iron is older than fossils, older than continents, older than the moon's familiar face, and it is still being written, every second, with every pulse of heat, with every falling droplet of nickel and iron, spiraling into deeper fire. We cannot hear it, but we are held by it. The auroras, the compass, the silence between radiation and breath, all are written in this molten script. And if the language stutters, if the convection falters, if the rain grows still, the field may vanish, not forever, but long enough to leave scars. It has happened before, in the slow collapse of polarity, in the tangled flux of reversal, in the quiet windows of exposure where light touched too deep, and species turned into silence. But always, the field returns, a different voice, a new accent, but the same source, because the core does not forget, it only rephrases, and so the earth continues to speak, even as we sleep, even as we forget to listen. The inner core is solid, but it is not still. It turns, like a bell buried within the planet, ringing so slowly that no surface ear will ever hear it. It is forged of iron, dense and bright, compressed into solidity not by cooling, but by pressure, a pressure so absolute it holds metal in place, even at temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun, and around it, the outer core, molten, molten, always molten, a sea of metal in convective motion, twisting, boiling, looping. This sea is the birthplace of magnetism, not through magnet, but through motion. It is here that charged particles dance in the grip of planetary spin, forming spirals that wrap the Earth in invisible thread. These threads don't stay in place. They slip, they tangle, they stretch across hemispheres, sink into the planet's crust, arc back into the sky like the paths of migrating birds. The geomagnetic field, then, is not a single shape. It is 100,000 invisible rivers, some wide, some narrow, some flowing backward for a time before dissolving. And each of these is born of iron rain, not rain as weather, rain as memory, as separation, as heat escaping a world still cooling from its own birth. Because the earth is not cold, not truly. It is cooling, forever cooling, and as it does, the elements divide. Iron sinks. Nickel weaves through it. Lighter elements, silicon, sulfur, oxygen, rise toward the boundaries. And in their divergence, motion begins. Motion becomes pattern. Pattern becomes field. Field becomes sky. What you see in a compass, what guides a whale through empty water, is born from that deep drifting descent. But that descent does not last forever. Eventually, the core will cool enough to quiet the motion. The field will flicker, weaken, fade, and the planet will be left without its shroud. But that age is not yet here. Now, the rain still falls, and with it, the language continues. In the South Atlantic anomaly, a thinning place in the field, a wound in the veil, we may be hearing a new syllable, a new shift, a breath in the syntax of reversal, because the anomaly is growing, not quickly, but insistently, as if something below has turned ever so slightly, redirected a current, rearranged a loop, redefined what north means in the core's quiet script. It is not a crack, it is a whisper, and not all whispers are warnings. Some are preludes, because a reversal does not begin at the poles, it begins in the heart. Magnetic north and south are only the ends of the sentence, what the world sees. But the sentence is formed below, among molten rivers that bend and double back on themselves. The earth may already be speaking a new direction. We may simply not yet know how to listen. Deep boreholes, volcanic records, layered sediments rich in magnetic grains. They give us glimpses, fragments, letters from an old language. They show us that the field has shifted before, has vanished, has returned. They show us that reversals are not sudden knives, but long, slow-turning tides, thousands of years, sometimes more. And within those tides, anomalies bloom. The field weakens in places, strengthens in others. Temporary poles appear in strange latitudes, north, where east once was, south, in the wrong hemisphere, and then a new alignment, a new orientation. The earth begins again. The compass recalibrates. Life follows, slowly, with loss, with adaptation, with silence, but not with ending, because iron still reigns, because heat still moves, because the core still turns, and while it turns, so too does the language flow, not in lines, in spirals, a script the planet writes not to be read, but to be lived. The inner core is not centered, it drifts, not far, not quickly, but just enough to remind the Earth that even its most sacred center does not sit still. Some scientists believe it rotates faster than the crust. Others say slower. Some whisper it may even stop then reverse. The truth is, the core has a rhythm, but no clock. A motion, but no schedule. It turns like memory, not in straight lines, but in spirals of return. And it is in this turning, this subtle imbalance between inner and outer, solid and molten, that the field is born. The dynamo is not a machine. It is not engineered. It is an emergent dance of difference. The solid inner core presses outward, its heat feeding the outer core. The outer core spins, its flows disturbed by Earth's rotation, twisting into columns, vortices, plumes of metallic breath. In these spirals, currents form. In these currents, magnetism emerges. What we call a field is not a thing. It is a pattern, a consequence of movement, and when the movement changes, so too does the pattern. Not all at once, not like a broken switch, but like a tide slowly forgetting how to rise, and then learning again, but in reverse. This is why reversals are not sudden, because the field is not a line, it is a conversation, and sometimes the core hesitates, stutters, rewrites a syllable, starts a sentence, then swallows it. These are the excursions, the almost reversals, moments in time where the poles began to flip, but did not. The record shows dozens, more perhaps. We don't know them all. Some leave only faint traces in magnetic sediment, others burn bright, etched in isotope and ice, in ash and mutation. The Lachamp was an excursion, so too, possibly, was the Blake event, and the Mono Lake, each one a fragment of Iron's language, a line interrupted. But these fragments are not mistakes. They are part of the voice, the unfinished sentences of a world still learning how to speak itself. The outer core may take thousands of years to rewrite its grammar, but once it begins, the signs ripple upward. The magnetic field weakens. New poles may appear, not just at the top and bottom of the world, but in between, transient dipoles, false directions. Imagine living in a time with 4 poles, 6, none at all. Not imagined, remembered. It has happened. It may again. What would happen then to the creatures that migrate by magnet? What of the turtle, the whale, the bird? Would they falter? Would they adapt? Would they learn to listen to a field that speaks in chords instead of tones? Some already do. There is evidence whispers in the data that animals use not just the direction, but the strength, the inclination, the slope of the field to orient themselves. A multi-layered sense, a 3-dimensional language, not just north or south, but the curve of northness, the flavour of southern pull. This is not simple, it is not mechanical, it is instinctual, inherited, and as the field changes, so too must the instinct. This is evolution not in limbs or lungs, but in navigation, in a species map of silence. We will not notice when it begins, not on the news, not in alarms. We will notice it in strange places, in birds that drift off course, in whales that beach themselves without cause, in the slow, creeping failure of satellites to find their place, in the quiet, because the earth will not scream. It will not signal its shifting with drama. It will move beneath us, like breath, like the deep sound of iron rain falling ever inward. And as it falls, the field will waver, and as the field wavers, the sky will flicker, and as the sky flickers, somewhere something will remember, not in words, but in direction. There is no line where the earth ends and the sky begins, only layers, gradients, thresholds of forgetting, and within these, the magnetic field stretches, not like a wall, but like a breath, the magnetosphere, an unseen ocean wrapped around the earth, billowing outward toward the sun, sculpted by the solar wind. It is not fixed, it is shaped in real time, pressed and stretched like silk in a storm. When the sun is quiet, the field relaxes, it expands, it softens. When the sun exhales, with flares, with storms, with coronal mass ejections, the field contracts, tenses, crackles with charged particles that would have scorched the world, if not for that invisible shield, and that shield is only as strong as the storm inside the earth. The field depends on the core depends on heat, the heat depends on the slow cooling of a planet still glowing in its belly, and so, one day, when the core cools enough, when the iron stops raining, when the dynamo stills, the field will vanish. Not suddenly, not with a scream, but like a candle burning out in fog, and the earth will be bare. The sun will rise as usual, but its breath will sting. Cosmic radiation will paint the sky in auroras that do not sleep. The atmosphere will wear thin, the climate will shift, genomes will alter. It will not be the end, but it will be a new beginning. The earth has lived without a magnetic field before. It may again, but for now, iron still falls. The dynamo still turns. The veil still holds, and within that veil, life continues. Quietly, magnetically, migrating through a world that still remembers where north is. But every pole is temporary, every field is an improvisation, and every improvisation is a kind of memory, not of what came before, but of the rhythm beneath what comes. That rhythm is the language. It does not use vowels. It does not rhyme. It pulses, and we live inside that pulse. Every map, every migration, every compass turned gently in a hiker's hand. All of them point not to a place, but to a process, to a rain that no one sees, to a song that no one hears, to a language that the planet speaks only to itself. We are not fluent. We never were, but the field touches us every day. It drapes across our skin like memory. It passes through our homes, our blood, our signals. We do not feel it, but we depend on it. And when it begins to change, as it is changing, we will not feel that either. Not right away, not with panic, but with questions. Why are the maps shifting? Why does the compass spin strange in certain latitudes? Why do the whales no longer find the deep? There will be no single answer. Only drift, only motion, and in that motion, a kind of elegance. Because the earth is not breaking, it is retuning, relearning its own voice, one reversal at a time. The language of Iron Rain has no final word, only the next word, the next line, the next field. And in that next field, we will still walk, we will still wonder, we will still hold the compass in our hand and ask softly, where is north? And the needle will answer, not with certainty, but with memory. Maps were never meant to be still. They are not truths. They are agreements, temporary outlines of memory, drawn across a planet that never ceases to move. The first maps were carved in clay, scratched on bark, etched into stone with fire and ink, not for navigation, but for remembrance, to hold in place the shape of a world that would not hold still. But the Earth did not sign those maps. Its continents drift, its oceans widen, its poles wander, and the lines we draw, coastlines, borders, compass roses, are not boundaries. They are stories, held in ink, not in stone. Even the word map betrays its softness. It comes from mappa, a cloth, a thing that folds, a thing that bends, because the earth, too, folds. It bends itself in slow tectonic rhythms. It crumples its crust like parchment in a dreaming hand, and beneath it all, the field turns. The magnetic poles do not stay where we leave them. Every decade, they shift. North is not north forever, and so, every system that relies on magnetic direction must adapt. From smartphones to submarines, from hiking trails to migrating birds, and when the poles move faster, as they have in recent years, those systems tremble. Even GPS, which orbits in light, depends on Earth's field in shadow, not for location, but for calibration, for knowing which way is which, because there is a difference between where you are and how you are oriented. A compass does not tell you location. It tells you meaning, direction, story, and when that meaning moves, maps must lie to preserve their structure. Like a memory adjusted to match a new emotion, the world magnetic model is updated every 5 years. Or it was. Now, it must be updated more often, because magnetic north is fleeing, because the story has changed. Once, explorers followed stars, then they followed the needle. Now, they follow signals from machines circling overhead, machines whose own orientation depends on a field they cannot see. And still the earth moves. The oceans do not remain in place. The crust floats slowly, deeply, with pressure and patience, on a mantle that flows like honey under mountains. This is plate tectonics, not destruction, not disaster, but drift, a slow migration of stone. Continents that were once together, Pangaea, have forgotten their unity. Now they pull apart. They forget one another like siblings, grown too old to recognize their shared breath, and the sea fills the space between them. But even the ocean floor is not fixed. At the mid-ocean ridges, lava pours upward. It cools. It records the magnetic field of the day. Then it is pushed outward, and new lava comes. Layer upon layer of seabed, each band a magnetic memory. reversed, normal, reversed again, a barcode of Earth's inner drift. Scientists read these bands like scripture, not for events, but for direction, for the movement of the field written in frozen stone, at the bottom of the world. And those maps, those magnetic seafloor stripes, tell a story older than nations, older than myths. They tell us that the field has flipped many times, and each time the oceans kept drifting, the crust kept folding, the maps kept lying, because maps are illusions of stillness. And the earth is a tide without end. The ocean does not remember. It reclaims. It does not hold shape like mountains do, or build permanence like bone. It breathes against the shore and forgets the edge. But the seabed remembers. In its minerals, in its ridges, in the slow, spreading wounds where continents once kissed. At the heart of each ocean lies a scar, a ridge, a place where new crust is born from below, from the mantle's molten murmur. And when that lava hardens, it inherits the direction of the Earth's magnetic field, like a newborn learning the sound of its mother's voice, north, south, sometimes reversed, sometimes unsure. Then the plates move, and another layer forms beside the last. Striped stone, dark, light, dark, light. Magnetic ink written across the floor of the sea. These stripes do not lie. They cannot. They are the only maps the Earth itself has drawn. The rest are paper, are screens, are models, are approximations, sketches of the present moment, snapshots of a river caught mid-bend. Because when the field reverses, the maps do not know how to speak. Navigation fails first in the smallest places. A ship's compass stutters, points not toward north, but toward something else. Something halfway between the poles, or nowhere at all. Then come the migrations. Birds circle longer in the sky. Turtles take wrong turns in their slow underwater arc. The whales sing deeper, softer, as if they are asking the earth to remind them where the currents used to go. And slowly, so slowly, we adjust. We recalibrate. We redraw, but the maps are always behind. Because the poles do not move with warning. They wander like memory, sometimes toward clarity, sometimes away, and yet we need maps, not just to find the way, but to believe there is a way. We hang them in homes, fold them in backpacks, trace them with fingertips in the dark, even when they lie, because the map is not the territory. It never was. It is a story of edges and centers, of known and unknown, of a world shaped into meaning by human need. But what happens when the poles shift faster than we can write the story down? What happens when magnetic north runs so far that true north loses its name? Already, cartographers adjust. Already, digital models update faster. But each time they do, they drift a little further from the sky that once held still. The ancient seafarers knew this. They did not trust only the compass. They watched birds, clouds, colour in the waves. They read the world like a body, not a book. Because the earth cannot be charted, only followed. Even the stars, fixed as they seem, are slipping. Precession tilts the axis. North stars change. In 12,000 years, Polaris will no longer be the pole star. Another will rise in its place, Vega, perhaps, and sailors of that age will look upward and call it true, not because it is, but because they need it to be. This is how navigation works, not in truth, in agreement, but the field does not agree. It never has. It turns inward, always inward, a self-correcting dance of iron beneath the skin of the world. So the maps will lie, and we will follow them anyway, because to drift is not to be lost, not when the earth is drifting too. There is no such thing as a fixed point, not here, not in a world that breathes beneath its bones. The 0 point on any map, the prime meridian, the equator, the magnetic north, these are not truths. They are ceremonies, moments where motion pauses long enough to be named. But naming is not knowing, and knowing is not stillness. Somewhere in the high Arctic, magnetic north is slipping. It no longer lingers in the Canadian ice. It moves toward Russia as if drawn by a forgotten memory. deep in the iron core. For centuries, explorers treated magnetic north as a place, a destination to find, to mark, to conquer. They did not know it wandered, that it had already moved, while they celebrated its capture. Even now, magnetic north flees faster than ever before, not meandering, but accelerating. It once moved 10 miles a year, now it races more than 30. Soon, perhaps more, it will pass the geographic pole. It may circle toward Siberia, or loop, or stop. No one knows. And so the world adapts, quietly, constantly. Airports rename runways. A runway once called 18/36 might become 17/35 because the compass has drifted just enough. These numbers, meant to reflect magnetic headings, are not for aesthetics. They are for pilots whose lives depend on knowing which way is wind and which way is iron, but iron forgets. And so maps must remember in its place until they cannot. At sea, ships no longer rely on compass alone. They lean on satellite, on inertial navigation, on gyroscopes tuned to the stars. But even satellites float in the magnetic breath of the Earth. They too are shaped by it, nudged by it, sheltered by its magnetosphere. When the field bends, they bend with it. When it weakens, they feel the storm. Charged particles pour through thinning layers, corrupting signals, damaging circuits. GPS falters. The silent structure of orientation becomes noise. And below, the sea listens. Ocean currents are not pulled by magnetism. They are sculpted by wind, by salinity, by heat. But creatures within them, those who move through the deep like thoughts, they feel the field. The salmon, returning home through rivers they've never seen. The loggerhead turtle, crossing whole oceans to find the sand where it was born. The pigeon, circling sky above cities with invisible lines in its blood. They do not read maps. They are maps, living memories of magnetic drift. When the poles shift, so do they. Sometimes they vanish, sometimes they adapt, and sometimes they redefine what direction means. Because migration is not about arrival, it is about alignment, a dance between instinct and the pulse of the world. And that pulse changes. We draw maps with lines. The Earth draws maps with tides. It is not just the continents that drift. It is everything. The crust, the field, the silence beneath both. Even gravity is not a constant. Even that which holds us shifts. There are maps of gravity now, models that show where the Earth's pull is weaker, stronger, bent by mountain and trench, by magma and melt. These too must be updated, because nothing holds still, not even the downward pull of weight itself. And so the Earth becomes a library of corrections, each model an apology for the last, each map a temporary agreement with motion. Even language betrays us. Longitude, latitude, true north, equator, words carved from stone to hold the illusion of fixity. But the Earth was never fixed, only folded, only drifting. And our maps, our beautiful, lying maps, will drift with it, because to move is not to be mistaken, it is to be alive. The Earth has always moved, but it never called it motion, only becoming. To it, a continent is not a continent, just a ripple in cooled stone, drifting slowly over a sea of fire, folding into mountain, sinking into trench. To it, a pole is not a place, but a whisper of the core's breath, a flicker of direction, as temporary as mist on morning water. To us, these things are more. They are roots, they are memory, they are the scaffolding of knowing where we are, and by extension, who we are. But if the poles move, if the maps fail, if north becomes south and east loses meaning, what remains? Not the lines, not the charts, but the drift, that quiet, sacred drift beneath everything. There is a kind of truth that does not depend on location, only rhythm. A bird finds home not by coordinates, but by feel. A whale sings its path, through tone, through pressure, through field. And we, for all our tools and satellites, still carry a deep, half-forgotten magnetism in the bones of our skulls, crystals of magnetite, tiny compasses, tuned in the womb to the Earth's original breath. Perhaps we no longer hear it, perhaps we never did, but it is there, waiting. If the poles reverse, maps will be rewritten, runways renamed, satellites reprogrammed. Some birds may vanish, some whales may spiral, but others will adapt. They always do, because drift is not death, it is translation. The Earth speaking in another tongue, one it spoke long before there were ears to hear it. And some truths survive the translation, that the crust will continue to move, that the ocean will continue to forget, that the poles will never stay, and yet there will always be direction. Even if it no longer points where we expect, we will draw new maps, because that is what we do. We will trace new lines, write new names, tilt the compass and call it stillness. But beneath the names, beneath the ink and algorithms, the Earth will keep drifting, and it will not ask permission, not to move, not to rearrange, not to rewrite the shape of what we call known. This is not rebellion, it is rhythm, the kind of rhythm only a molten heart can hold. So let the maps lie, let the oceans drift, let the poles forget where they belong, because the truth was never in the lines. It was always in the movement between them, and the silence that carries us forward, even when the compass does not. Reversal is not a storm, it is a pause, a thinning, a hush in the long breath of the planet. There is a silence between magnetic poles, when they forget their names, a space where north is no longer north, but not yet south. In that space, everything waits. The Earth has reversed its field many times, not just flipped, but unraveled. The process is not immediate. It does not crack like lightning, or fall like fire. It begins with drift, poles wandering, strength fading, a slow unraveling of the magnetic fabric that holds the sky in place. And then, not a flip, but a fragmentation. Small poles appear, multipolar confusion, north here, north there, south, floating in between. A world with no compass, only echoes. This is the silence between the switch. It has no date, no signature. It is not an event, it is a process, measured not in hours or days, but in centuries, millennia. The Lassamp event lasted little more than 1,000 years, brief by Earth's measure, but still long enough for the planet to forget its orientation. During that time, the field weakened by 90%. The shield that shelters us from solar wind thinned to nearly nothing. Auroras bloomed over the tropics. Radiation crept into lower altitudes, and deep in caves, humans painted their hands in red dust, perhaps trying to remember something the sky could no longer hold. This pattern repeats, not precisely, but faithfully. Every few 100,000 years, the field unwinds, slows, confuses itself, and then reverses. We do not know why, not fully. Some say it is instability in the core. Others say it is part of a thermal rhythm, a convection current growing tired, before rising in reverse. But the Earth does not explain, it only turns. In Madagascar, in the Andes, in ancient lava beds across the seafloor, there are records. Magnetic minerals aligned not to today's field, but to a forgotten one, pointing south when north should have been, facing east in places where east did not exist. These are the fossils of orientation, frozen compasses, in stone. They tell us not how the reversal felt, but that it happened. The silence itself leaves no voice, only absence. What happened to life during these reversals? We are still asking. The fossil record is murky. Some reversals coincide with extinction, others do not. But perhaps extinction is too loud a word. Perhaps what truly happened was mutation, redirection, a shift in the species that could hear the Earth's voice, and those that could no longer follow. The silence between the switch is not a destruction, it is a doorway, and what passes through is never quite the same. Because while the poles drift and reform, the rest of the planet keeps moving. The crust still folds, the seas still rise, the stars still spin in place. But the compass no longer speaks, and in that pause, that breathless interlude between directions. New languages begin, not of speech, but of sense. A beetle learning to follow scent instead of field. A bird recalibrating its migration to the position of the moon. A species burrowing deeper, not to hide from light, but from lightness. The weightlessness of a world unmoored. It is a strange truth that the earth may forget itself and survive. That in the unravelling there is no collapse, only transition, only the long, echoing turn of something ancient righting itself again, but softer, always softer. The reversal does not shout, it sighs, it stretches across centuries like a shadow falling slowly across the face of the sea. And in that long shadow, nothing is certain, except change. There is no single moment when the field flips, no switch, no climax. Instead, a wandering, a stammer in the earth's magnetic voice. The poles do not leap, they drift, and in their drifting, the field grows quiet. Not gone, but scattered, like a mirror dropped gently into water. The structure weakens, the lines blur, and magnetism becomes a fog of soft intentions. In this haze, navigation falters, not always catastrophically, but subtly. An animal may begin its migration a week too early. A tree may bloom in a zone it once avoided. A signal may curve into silence, never reaching its destination. And all the while, the field turns. It grows weak, not everywhere, but in strange patches. The South Atlantic anomaly expands, not just a dip in strength, but a reminder that the veil is fraying unevenly. Satellites passing overhead encounter this region and stagger. Instruments glitch, circuits short, as if the sky beneath them suddenly forgets how to carry. Even in low orbit, the silence is felt, and on the ground, the silence moves through stone. Paleomagnetism is the study of fossilized directions. Minerals in clay, in lava, in ocean floor basalt, tiny compass needles locked in place by the magnetic field of their birth. They form a record, not of life, but of orientation. They do not remember what happened. They remember where the planet pointed when they were born. During a reversal, those points scatter. A layer of sediment may hold grains aligned east, then west, then somewhere between. A magnetic confusion layered in stone, a pause in certainty. The silence between the switch is not a blank page. It is a page written in too many directions at once. There are myths, too, not in the magnetic grains, but in the stories left behind by those who stared into auroras that burned where no aurora should be. Skies igniting over equators, light falling in places the ancestors called sacred. Too much colour, too much sound, and then the quiet. In these moments, some turned to caves, some carved new gods, some pressed their hands into walls as if to anchor the body to a direction the sky no longer offered. Perhaps they felt the silence. Perhaps they named it. Perhaps they carried it in blood and bone and story. And perhaps, just perhaps, we still do, because there is something within us that notices when the sky shifts, even now, something that tilts slightly when the compass fails, something that remembers before the mind can speak. That is what a field reversal awakens. Not terror, not chaos, but awareness, a kind of geologic dream state where nothing is wrong, but nothing is familiar, where directions become soft, where navigation becomes myth. And in that myth, something ancient returns, not to end the world, but to remind it that permanence was never promised. Only motion, only drift, only the long breath between polarities, only the silence. Between the switch, there is a language in reversal, but it is not spoken. It is carried through atoms, through sediment, through creatures who follow paths not drawn, but felt. The silence between magnetic switches is not void. It is translation, a period when the earth, mid-sentence, changes dialect. The magnetic field, as it collapses into confusion, does not disappear entirely. It fragments, scatters into patches, local fields, partial shields, pulses of guidance, without symmetry. This is the planet murmuring to itself, trying to remember its own voice through noise. We live inside that voice. Every moment, every breath, every signal from the sun is either welcomed or warded away by this invisible tide. And when that tide withdraws, when it slackens, shifts, more than light passes through, the solar wind, usually curved around the globe like silk in water, strikes deeper, harder. Charged particles fall into the upper atmosphere, breaking apart molecules, shaping ozone, rewriting the chemistry of air. It is not fire. It is erosion. Erosion of shielding, erosion of memory. And yet, life continues. Because the earth does not abandon. It adapts. And life follows. Some of the most ancient organisms, microbes living in ocean mud deep below the crust, contain tiny chains of magnetite, structures that let them feel the field, tiny compasses of ancient blood. These are not tools. They are organs. There are fish that navigate murky waters by sensing gradients in magnetism. There are butterflies who migrate using both starlight and the pull of the poles. And when the poles switch, when the lines vanish or turn inward, they wait. They feel. They shift. Because the field is not a map, it is a rhythm. When it stutters, those who listen adjust. We have found these tiny compasses in the skulls of birds, of fish, of humans. Magnetoreception, not as folklore, but as fact. A sense most have forgotten, but the body has not. A whisper still lingers in the cells, a way to feel direction, even when vision fails. And what happens then, when that direction fades? The body remembers something older. Some scientists speculate that species may evolve through reversal, not by accident, but by necessity. Radiation rises, genomes change, not catastrophically, but subtly. Patterns shift, traits emerge, eyes that see farther, cells that repair faster, instincts that feel not magnetic north, but the memory of it. This is not science fiction. It is fossil logic, a field that collapses, leaves the door open for variation, and variation is the alphabet of survival. Perhaps this is why reversals do not end life. They transform it. They offer space, time, silence enough for something new to emerge. And maybe that is the purpose of the pause, not failure, but renewal, a reset of orientation, a chance to realign, to shift the compass, not toward a pole, but toward something deeper, a pull not of metal, but of memory. Even now, the earth may be entering such a pause. The poles drift faster, the field weakens, the anomaly grows, and beneath our feet, the molten language changes tone. No one knows if this is the beginning of reversal, or merely a rehearsal, another excursion in the dance of direction. But something is happening, something quiet, and in that quiet, a question. If the compass fails, what will we follow? And somewhere in the bones, in the sleeping magnetite of our cells, the answer waits, not in words, but in a subtle turn, a tilt of instinct, a silent adjustment, toward whatever direction the earth becomes next. There are no monuments to magnetic reversals, no towers of stone, no inscriptions left in the open air, because what happens in the silence is not remembered in stone. It is remembered in dust, in clay, in driftwood buried beneath forgotten beaches, in directions fossilized, not in language, but in alignment. The memory of the field is kept by things that never speak. Ash, ice, the fine iron particles in cooled lava that still point to a north that no longer exists. And yet, we know, not through myth, but through magnetism, through layers of rock that betray their direction, like letters folded into the earth's crust, sealed in fire, but meant to be read in time. These magnetic letters tell a slow story, one of uncertainty, of fields that fractured, then reformed, of poles that circled themselves, like dancers forgetting the steps, but not the rhythm. Each reversal is unique. Some take 1,000 years, others stretch across 20,000, some stall halfway, a field that begins to switch, then falters, returns, like a thought unfinished, or a breath held too long. This variability is not chaos. It is Earth's way of keeping time. Without a clock, the reversals do not come on schedule. They do not obey patterns. They arise, the way seasons once did, before calendars, before names. Only motion, only return. And with each return, a field that is not the same, a structure rewritten, a new direction born from old flow. The iron in the core does not resist. It simply changes course. Currents rearranged, vortices respun, and in that shift, the world above adjusts. We may not feel it, not in the feet, not in the breath, but somewhere a compass needle turns, invisibly. There is something sacred in that, something profoundly unhuman, because this is not a story of control. It is a story of surrender, to drift, to unknowing, to the long patience of a planet, relearning its shape. There is no catastrophe in reversal, only change. And in that change, a kind of grace. Skies that shimmer beyond the poles, oceans that listen differently, creatures that adapt not through conquest, but through forgetting, and remembering again. The silence between the switch is not failure. It is intermission. It is breath held before the next direction begins. And when the poles do return, when the field rebuilds itself in reverse, north where south once stood, it is not the end of a story. It is the next sentence, softly spoken, aligned anew. We may never witness this moment, or we might already be living within it. A reversal that began before maps noticed, a drift so slow we mistake it for stillness. But the earth knows, the field knows, the lava remembers, and someday the compass will too, and it will not call it loss. It will call it turning. There is a light that was never meant to touch the ground. It lives in the sky's higher rooms, filtered by magnetism, slowed by atmosphere, held at bay by fields the earth breathes into being. It is not sunlight. It is what travels with it, buried within it, carried across space on wind, so thin, so fast, so starborn that it forgets how to stop. Cosmic rays, protons, ions, solar flares that reach for planets, like waves brushing coasts they will never know. And Earth, this pale blue island wrapped in its invisible veil, receives them gently, because it must. The magnetic field is not just orientation, it is shelter, a shield woven not of metal, but of motion, an unseen storm, holding back a brighter one. But when the poles drift, when the field thins, when the silence of reversal begins to open, this light forgets where it belongs, and it falls, not in beams, but in particles, in subtle rains of radiation, soft enough to go unnoticed, persistent enough to alter everything. The atmosphere, struck by these visitors, responds with chemistry. Ozone peels away, molecules twist, clouds form where they shouldn't, storms gather their thoughts in unfamiliar seasons. It is not apocalypse, it is erosion of boundaries, of balance, of the long-standing conversation between light and life. The last time the field faltered, the Lassamp event, cosmic radiation reached farther than it should. Isotopes of carbon-14 surged in the air. Tree rings grew narrow. Frost returned where spring once lived. The sun did not grow stronger. The earth grew softer, and in that softness, light touched places it was never meant to touch. At high altitudes, aviation becomes exposure. Flight crews, passengers, they rise above the densest shielding. They carry home invisible residues of sky. Most of the time, this is nothing, a background whisper, a silent companion. But when the field weakens, the whisper grows, and in that amplification, the light becomes sharp. It finds the circuits in satellites. It dances through power lines. It writes its own messages in machines, often wrong, often bright. Auroras bloom at the equator, not as beauty, but as symptom, a warning sung in green and red, too low, too loud. And beneath that singing sky, cells shift, not all at once, not visibly, but radiation has no need for haste. It changes what is delicate, the spiral of DNA, the balance of replication, the slow, exquisite grammar of life. Some changes heal, some do not. And still, the earth does not resist. It endures, because it remembers the last time, and the time before that. This light, this wild, ancient starlight, has visited before, and life bent, but did not break. Because even in erosion, there is becoming. Even in exposure, there is memory. And sometimes, light must fall for something hidden to rise. In the silence between field lines, the sun finds a way in. It does not rage. It does not ask. It arrives. And when the earth's defenses falter, not break, not collapse, but thin like worn fabric, that arrival becomes intimate. The solar wind is not wind at all. It is plasma, charged particles hurled into space from the surface of a star that does not sleep. This wind shapes entire planets. It sculpts tails on comets, erodes atmospheres, and once stripped Mars bare. Mars had a field once, a magnetic breath like Earth's, but it cooled too fast. Its core stilled, its shield disappeared, and the wind moved in. Now, the red planet is a memory of what light can do when it forgets to stay in the sky. Earth remains different, for now, because the core still turns, the iron still reigns, the field still hums. But every weakening is a rehearsal of exposure, and each time the field thins, the boundaries tremble. Our atmosphere, fragile, layered, and alive, does its best to help. Ozone rises to meet what the field cannot deflect. Clouds shift, climate adjusts, weather responds. But these are responses, not barriers. The shielding of the Earth is not absolute. It is collaborative, a ballet between core and sky, between motion and molecule. And when the field weakens during a reversal, that ballet stumbles. The ozone layer, already fragile, thins further, allowing ultraviolet radiation to seep where it should not. Surface life changes. Some species suffer mutation, others shift range. A few thrive in new conditions, carved by light. And still, we adapt. We write equations, launch satellites, monitor solar flares, track geomagnetic storms. We call them by names. We assign them classes: M class, X class, events of brightness. But the brightness is only part of the truth. The deeper truth is written in damage we don't see. Circuit faults in quiet machines, satellite decay over invisible anomalies, miscarriages of navigation, in birds, in fish, in data. And above it all, the aurora. We stare in awe. We point, we wonder, but do we hear what it is trying to say? The aurora is a voice, the voice of the solar wind interacting with a field that is changing shape, a conversation, a signal, and when that conversation grows louder, more frequent, more global, it is not just spectacle, it is symptom. The earth is listening, and so must we, because the next reversal may already be beginning, or it may not come for 10,000 years. The signs are subtle, the models are incomplete, but the trend is real. The poles move faster, the field is weaker, anomalies deepen, and light grows bolder, not blinding, just more present, more insistent. A guest that was once content at the edge, now pressing into the room, and in that press, life adjusts. Geneticists find unexplained shifts in mitochondrial behavior. Ecologists notice changes in animal breeding patterns. Atmospheric scientists detect new ratios of greenhouse gases, not driven by industry, but by solar input. A field weakening, however slightly, alters everything, because light is not only warmth, it is instruction, information, a force that rewrites when the boundaries change. And still, we look up. Still, we dream beneath the green curtain. Still, we wonder how something so beautiful could be anything but benign. But the most haunting truths do not come in fire. They come in shimmer. They come in silence. They come when light forgets where to fall. There is a memory in every molecule of the sky, not of colour, not of heat, but of protection, of the quiet arrangement between planet and star, an agreement that light may shine, but not burn. That agreement is kept by magnetism, the field, the silent shroud, and when that shroud thins, the sky remembers a different shape, a wilder one, above the clouds, above the stratosphere, in the thinness where satellites orbit and whispers from space arrive. This is where the first cracks form. Solar storms push past the edge. They batter the ionosphere. They warp the fragile rules of radio, of timing, of orbit. To some, this is technical, a failure of systems, a risk to infrastructure. But to the Earth, it is ancient, a return, because the planet has known nakedness before, and in those times, it did not cry out. It did not resist. It adapted. It evolved. It allowed light to fall where it had once been filtered. And through that fall, through the increased radiation, through the shifting climate, through the deeper mutations, life changed shape. The first flowering plants bloomed. In an age when cosmic rays surged, the earliest mammals emerged, beneath skies flickering with magnetic instability. And perhaps even the leap to human thought was touched by light that reached too far. Mutation is not always ruin, it is potential, randomness with direction, not from intent, but from the conditions life responds to. So what happens if the light returns? If another reversal begins? If the shield grows thin again? Perhaps new species will emerge, in niches we have not imagined. Perhaps old instincts will awaken, senses long buried under certainty. The sky will glow again, where it should not. And someone will look up, not with fear, but with the quiet awe that comes from seeing the world become unfamiliar, because that unfamiliarity is not failure, it is revelation. The field is not just a shield, it is a veil, and when the veil lifts, what appears is not danger, it is depth, a deeper participation in the cosmos, a reminder that we are not separate from the sky, that what falls from the sun has always shaped us, and always will. This is not permission to forget caution, it is permission to remember wonder. The next time the aurora rises above the equator, let it be seen not only as anomaly, but as language. A new phrase in the dialogue between Earth and star. A reminder that maps may fail, but the dance continues. That direction may vanish, but meaning deepens. That protection may falter, but from it can come a new way of seeing. When light forgets where to fall, life remembers where it began. Not in safety, but in change. Not everything the earth remembers is written in stone. Some things are written in sky, not the sky we see, the blue veil of clouds and weather, but the sky behind it, the one mapped by stars and measured by poles. That sky moves with the field, because the magnetic poles are not fixed, and neither are the heavens they point toward. When the field shifts, when north becomes south, the entire orientation of the planet changes, not its spin, but its sense of up, its compass of meaning, and when that compass forgets, so too do the stars. Not their names, but their positions, their roles in the quiet theatre of navigation. Once, sailors followed Polaris, the North Star, bright and unmoving. But even Polaris is a temporary fixture, a coincidence of geometry and time. Earth's axis wobbles, tracing a slow circle every 26,000 years. Precession, they call it. A drifting of the planet's tilt, like the slow spiral of a spinning top. And in that spiral, new stars take the stage. New poles rise in the sky. Vega will be north someday, then Deneb, then others without names. This is not loss. It is revision, a quiet rewriting of where the sky begins. And when the magnetic field reverses, that revision deepens, because every map, celestial or terrestrial, depends on assumptions. Assumptions about where north lies, about how direction behaves, about which way time flows. But the Earth does not honour assumptions, it honours motion. So the maps redraw themselves, and the stars shift their witness. GPS, our modern sky script, depends on more than satellites. It depends on time, on synchronized signals between space and ground, each guided subtly by the Earth's magnetic field. A disruption in that field ripples through the system. Errors compound. The sky forgets its own reflection, and yet we go on. We still look up. We still name the constellations. We still trace Orion's belt, not because it leads us somewhere, but because it tells us who we are. The dream of the sky is not about direction. It is about belonging. Even when the poles reverse, even when auroras bloom across the tropics, even when the compass falls silent, we will still dream beneath the stars, because the stars are not fixed, but they are faithful. They return in new patterns, new arrangements, just as we do. Every reversal is a rebirth of orientation, of imagination, a chance to rewrite the map, not with certainty, but with wonder. To ask again, not where am I, but what does it mean to be here? And in that asking, something ancient stirs, not fear, not confusion, but the memory that even in the sky, change is sacred. To live on Earth is to forget that we are floating, that our feet press into a crust, drifting over molten breath, spinning in darkness, shielded by silence. But sometimes the silence shifts, and in that shift, what we thought was stable becomes song. The magnetic field is not just a force, it is a rhythm, a pulse beneath the architecture of day and night. And when that pulse changes, the world dreams in a different key. Migratory birds, long tuned to the song of the poles, begin to adjust, not by thought, but by sense. Some will lose their way, some will find new paths, some will no longer migrate at all, because the map they followed no longer speaks the same language. It hums differently. North hums like south, south hums like sleep, and yet life responds with grace. Evolution has always been shaped, not by chaos, but by rhythm interrupted. And when the field reverses, when the compass forgets where to point, evolution listens. Genomes are not static, they are responsive, they change with the field, with the light, with the direction of pressure. During previous reversals, a species emerged, not by design, but by adaptation in motion, subtle mutations, a shift in magnetoreception, a tolerance for radiation, a new alignment with the altered sky. And humans, too, will adjust. We may not notice at first. We will recalibrate instruments. We will rewrite algorithms. We will compensate for signal loss and data drift and the quiet failures of navigation. But underneath, in ways we do not yet measure, we will change. We already carry the remnants of fields long past, tiny crystals of magnetite in our brains, directional sensitivities dulled by city lights, by screens, by noise. What if those senses stir again? What if the dream that rewrites the sky also rewrites the self? Not all change is loss. Some is remembering, some is return. Long before compasses, we used the stars. Long before stars, we used the wind, the sun, the shape of trees. Long before memory, we felt, and feeling is not bound by polarity. Even if every compass needle spun endlessly, even if every GPS system failed, we would still find our way. Because to be human is not to be fixed. It is to respond, to adjust, to evolve inside the storm without losing the shape of hope. That is what the Earth has always done. The reversals are not disasters. They are rearrangements, a recitation of a different version of the same old poem. Direction is not a destination. It is a dialogue. And the field, changing as it is not ending that dialogue. It is adding new verses, verses written in auroras, seen from rainforests, in birdsong that echoes differently across new skies, in maps drawn not by lines, but by rhythms. This is how the dream unfolds, not in facts, but in feelings, in the soft surrender to a world that refuses to stay still. And from that surrender, meaning is born. Even when the stars seem to shift, even when north turns south, we will still look up and we will still say, there is something here that feels like home. The end of a pole is not the end of the world. It is a turning, a gentle, almost imperceptible rotation in how the planet holds its breath. And when the turn is complete, when north becomes south and south becomes something new, nothing explodes, nothing screams. Instead, the compass falls quiet, and then it begins again, as if nothing ever changed, but something did. Not the stars, not the sky, but the story we tell about them. A map is rewritten, not out of error, but out of evolution. The birds follow a new hum, the whales sing along different lines, and we, still wandering beneath the same constellations, feel something shift in the silence, a soft disorientation, a feeling of being untethered from a direction we once trusted, but in that untethering, a kind of wonder, a new path. The sky does not end with what we remember. It begins with what we imagine. The dream of the earth was never one of permanence. It was one of continuity, of movement, of rhythm, of spirals too slow to see, but too deep to ignore. Even the rocks know this. The deepest ones, the ones buried beneath oceans, beneath fire, beneath time. They remember poles that no longer exist, magnetic fields turned inside out, skies where light once fell without invitation, and they do not speak in panic. They speak in pattern, reversal, realignment, return, and always, always, resilience. The earth has never held still. It has turned inside its sleep, writing and rewriting itself, with every breath of molten iron. We call it magnetism, but perhaps it is memory, the deep memory of a world that sings in field lines and rearranges its story, not to confuse, but to renew. And if the poles shift again, as they will, and if the sky changes its pattern, as it must, then let us not be afraid. Let us listen. Let us draw new constellations on maps that have never been stable. Let us follow new birds as they trace new routes across invisible heavens. Let us watch the auroras descend like curtains over cities that forgot they were once sacred. And in that glow, in that falling of light, may we remember that the earth does not ask for permission to change. It simply turns, and in turning, it invites us to turn with it, not toward certainty, but toward awareness, not toward permanence, but toward participation, not toward the sky as it was, but the sky as it could be, because the dream that rewrites the sky does not erase. It reframes, it folds old truths into new silences. It allows what was to become what is becoming. And in that becoming, we are not lost. We are found in the magnetic silence, beneath the poles, found in the stardust, caught in our bones, found in the pause, between forgetting and remembering. The earth is still speaking. It always has been, not in language, but in alignment. And we, floating on its skin, listening to its breath, must only do this. Breathe with it, drift with it, sleep beside it, let it turn, and know that nothing is ending, only beginning again. What if Earth once knew something and forgot? It didn't forget. It simply turned. And in its turning, it remembered something older than memory. A dream made of poles, of light, of silence. A map not drawn, but felt. A direction not toward place, but toward wonder. Sleep now, traveller. The compass is still turning, and the dream continues.